And this is just really short-sighted thinking from the government. I think they just want to introduce something now so that they can actually take something into this year's election, if you're going to have one, or into the 2024 elections.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Joe Emilio Show. This is going to be a different kind of episode. I recently saw a clip or segment on SABC about the basic income grant, and I thought to myself, you know who knows a lot about the basic income grant? Dumo, who's joined me to look at this segment, and we're going to try and debunk some of the things that are being said in this segment. Dumo, how are you doing?
I'm good, Joe, and itching to talk about this basic income grant.
We don't want any of the viewers watching this video to be confused with what the mainstream media is trying to push out. So there's going to be some interesting points to cover. Having said that,
lecture on the 18th of July, President Cyril Ramaphosa weighed in on the issue of the basic income grant.
The suggestions have been made that in addressing the needs of our people, we must be bold enough to think about interventions such as the basic income grant. A number of panelists mentioned this. Yes, it requires bravery. And some suggestions have also been made of where the money will come from.
So as the president said, some suggestions have been made of where the money is going to come from. I think it's because people are wondering where are we going to get the money? And some statistics will be shared in just a moment. But I mean, just with that little clip about the president, don't you think he's a bit delusional of even giving this a thought?
For political reasons, it may be the right thing because they want to stay in power. They want to create a dependent class. But, you know, in the real world, where we are right now, such an idea is not a good idea. So there are sources that are in my head where they can probably get money from. But either way, they all have negative consequences. Like, you can either take out debt. Remember, if you take out debt, we got a debt to GDP ratio that's close to 100%. And already the money that we're paying towards that debt is going to the interest. You can get it through tax. And again, taxation is not the best thing. As a libertarian, I think taxation is theft. But for those who think there's nothing wrong with tax, either way, when you start taxing people more, what's going to happen is that, especially the corporates, they will leave and go to other countries where they pay less tax. And for the citizens, what's actually going to happen is that the tax revenue will actually decrease over time because, they will be burdened. So those are like really the main sources. And also one more source is they can print out money. And you know what happens with money when you print it out? Inflation, your savings, not your savings, but rather your money that you have saved will become will become more worthless in the future.
Yeah. That's how, like in Zimbabwe, they pay 1 million for bread. So there you go.
The Minister of Social Development, Lindiwe Zulu, had previously indicated that her department had drafted a paper on a basic income grant for consultation. But with the recent unrest, the desperation among those who have nothing became even clearer to see. For the longest time, the ANC has had a policy of dealing with unemployment, poverty and inequality, but it's largely agreed that it's not been that effective. The aim is a noble and correct one, but as with any policy, it will have implied costs.
They say that it's like a noble thing to do, right? And I guess what I want to ask is also like, I don't feel it's correct to say that we need a basic income grant because we saw violence and riots, and it just proves that, due to these riots and violence and looting, people want money. Giving them money will solve the problem. I don't know. How do you feel?
Yeah, I don't think it is a noble thing. The reality is that the government had ample time to really correct this problem a long time ago, but they didn't. They allowed things to get worse, and they've actually introduced legislation along the way that has made it very difficult for people to get jobs. We've found that if you look at the legislation in South Africa, a lot of it is geared towards the labor unions. It favors them. You find that there's the minimum wage as well, which makes it difficult for young people to get a job, because it tells young people that if your value of labor is worth less than 20 rand an hour, then therefore you can't work. And now, you put these factors in together with other factors, you get these riots. Now, that's not to say that the rioting is justified, but definitely, bad government policy definitely played a role in this. And now they want to introduce an even much more worse policy to try and solve it. We're in
Yeah.
trouble.
The fact of the matter is, we expect about 12 million people to want to make use of that opportunity within a year. And that would detail that South Africa would have to find 50 billion rand in extra income. That would mean we need to find nearly 4% more money from our tax take. That would require, for example, more than 2% increase in the VAT rate. So it's unlikely that you can just do it with taxes. You'll have to cut back some budget programs, and it will be a very dangerous thing, because ultimately, like everything else, it never goes away. And we already have over 18 million people on some form of grant. To add another 12 million to that means that more than half the South African population is going to be on some sort of government grant.
Yeah, so as you said, you heard correctly, more than half the South African population will be on some form of grant. Dumo, is it me, or is it like, I get this feeling that that's not something to be proud of as a nation, to have 50% of your population on a social grant. I know they're trying to spin it like, oh, look at us, the government, we're giving our people money, like a Robin Hood kind of situation, but I don't think it's going to end up like that.
You're right. It's not going to end up like that. I think how Ramaphosa spun it at the beginning was based on the fact that, oh, these guys are poor, we need to do something for them. And for people that want to assist, they may feel some sort of sympathy, but they get duped at the same time, because their emotions are getting taken advantage of. The reality is that if you want to add 12 more million people to the number of dependents that the government wants to have, it's all for political purposes. The government is trying to create a dependent class. The ANC is losing popularity, and now they are really going out there to try and get a program that will actually make people more reliant on them, so that they always vote for them. So, for example, even with the pension grants, and even the child grants as well, I've heard of people saying that they're going to vote for ANC because the ANC gives them money. And that's the reality. They do understand that. They know that when people are poor, they become desperate, and they're willing to take any money, and they don't care where it comes from, because the ANC knows at the end of the day that if they can market that they were the ones that brought the grant, they will get the votes, and they'll try, and that will be an attempt to at least secure the electoral future.
Yeah, all about the elections, right?
Another economist basically seconds Schussler's view, saying that many government programs like housing, education and defence, among others, would likely have their budgets cut further to accommodate a basic income grant.
We may look at the current social grant program and look at ways in which we can reduce that, or even cut, let's say, the old age grant or the child grant, which is also not ideal. So very tough decisions have to be made, but the problem here is that we need to look at the socioeconomic problems. So how are we solving for poverty? How are we solving for unemployment? How are we solving for the education problem that is not leading to job absorption? I think that is a better way of looking at it, rather than introducing the basic income grant indefinitely.
That sounded sensible to me, somewhat. Not all of it, but almost like saying, this is what I heard, almost like saying, it's like putting a Band-Aid on it. We need to actually look at the real problem.
Right. That's, I also got a sense of that as well. And I also got a sense of the fact that she was also trying to say that, listen, we actually don't need the income grant, but I think because her circles. She doesn't want to come off as like a crazy right winger, as they'll describe me, right? So, and she's
Only
being very
you.
polite.
Are you saying I'm not?
No, you're not.
Okay.
You-
Some
you-
circles
you-
would say otherwise.
Yeah. Okay, but they'll call you and I crazy right wingers, right? But I think with her, she was just trying to really be the voice of reason without being too aggressive. And one thing that stuck with me, she said, "Well, let's talk about the socioeconomic issues. There are ways that we can solve them without introducing an income grant indefinitely." And again, poverty is the first one. Unemployment that she mentioned as well. With poverty, again, you got to make it easy for people to start businesses and so forth. With unemployment, look at your labor laws. Make them. You got to make them balanced. It can't be so heavily in favor of the unions or the laborers, and which will disincentivize people from actually hiring. In fact, companies have left this country because they said that South Africa's labor laws are crazy.
Yep.
And then there's the third one, which is education. Our education system is fraudulent. I mean, I've heard of people like, they finish matric, they got like 35% for maths literacy, and we give them a certificate saying, yes, you have done maths sufficiently well, go out there and get a job. Like, that is clearly, those problems are making it difficult for many people to actually get a job. And to introduce an income grant indefinitely, it's not going to solve that.
No.
In fact, what you're going to tell them is, no, do bad at school. Unions keep doing keep making crazy laws, and poverty will never solve you, because you know what? We'll just give these guys money, and that's fine. And why should I even work when? I mean, why should I even work? Yeah, when there's a grant waiting for me at the end of the day that rewards me for being poor.
And then on top of that, you're also going to give, or from what we're hearing so far, you're going to give money to the people who looted. So you're going to reward them for looting. If they're not happy with the amount of the social grants, which I hear is about 1,300 Rand, somewhere there, that's not enough. That's definitely not enough. They'll just loot again.
Exactly. Great point. Because at some point, right, because you're going to give these guys money, there's going to be a demand for goods and services, a high demand. And as a result, inflation, right? So therefore, at some point, their spending patterns are going to catch up with them, and they're going to demand more money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And then where they're going to get that extra money from? And this is just really short-sighted thinking from the government. I think they just want to introduce something now so that they can actually take something into this year's election, if you're going to have one, or into the 2024 elections. And then, and then hoping that it'll be someone else's problem in the future. But I mean, 1,300 Rand is going to be a lot for 12 million people. I mean, the money, that's crazy. Wow. I mean, there are people working for less every month. So what's going to happen? When if this thing gets introduced, they'll just quit their job and say, well, okay, guys, I'm going to get a basic income grant for more anyway. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's not a good thing.
Again, I just want to clarify. That's the rumors I'm hearing. I don't know if it is that amount. If it is, like Dumo said, like it's very dangerous. Like so dangerous.
While admitting that the fiscal constraints will pose a challenge, one academic stresses that the cost of not making some sort of provision, especially for the unemployed, is also not sustainable in a country like South Africa, and that genuine efforts to find a solution must be made.
I think that there are a number of ways in which a basic income support could be, or a basic income grant could be financed. And there isn't an easy solution. It's true. South Africa is facing serious fiscal constraints. There's no question about that. There are cutbacks to essential services happening. Even defense is needed, as we found last week. So yes, we need to find the money, but I don't think we should say because the money is not there, we shouldn't even think about it. What we need to do is find a solution to the problem. The solution is providing income support to people in the working age population who are currently surviving maybe on their child support grant or by begging on the street. That's not a dignified way to survive, and it's not something that South Africa should be proud of. We should find solutions to this problem.
I'm a little bit confused by what that guy was saying. it sounded to me like he was saying that people who are on social grants not a dignified way to live, but still advocating for the basic income grant.
Ah,
Is
that's
that what he
interesting.
said? Or are you also
It,
confused?
you know, taking what you said into account and what he said into account, now it's actually a good point that you made. It's a very good point that someone is actually surviving on the child support grant. That's not dignified. So let's dignify it by adding more. That's actually a good point, Joe.
And
Yeah,
then he
I
also
like that.
said you know, we can't say, oh, there's no money, we have to just find a solution. The only way these grants are going to be possible is if there's money. You can't have one without the other. It doesn't. You're like, oh well, you know. And then you also hear, you know, the cutting of other services, you know, other grants and other services, and that's worrying because I mean we've now seen the effects of, you know, the SAPS budget cut, which okay, SAPS was already in trouble before the budget cut, but now there's an even bigger budget cut, and it's been given to the private securities of the elites. Well, saw that coming.
Right.
But now you're talking about, okay, we're gonna take money from other grants and we're gonna put it into this grant. How? I mean, people are still gonna be upset because now you got to go to that person who is on the um, child grant. For argument's sake, say they had 500 rand per child, and now you say, oh, we're sorry, you're only gonna get 250 per child, but you'll get 1,000 rand because you're unemployed or you're not working. I mean, they're still going to be upset because they're going to be like, yeah, but I could have had 1.5 if you didn't take away the 250. That's how people think.
Right. Right. No, those are good points, Joe. And those ones didn't cross my mind, to be honest. And in fact, it's actually good points that you mentioned there. I think that um, just to add my points to it is that I think with regards to what was said by that other economist or no, academic, sorry, and that's the problem with academics. A lot of them are very out of touch with reality.
Mm.
He thinks that the only problem is that there is no money. No, that is not the problem. The problem is that the grant is dangerous. And the problem is also that the reality is that we've been having bad economic policies for a long period of time, and we need
Absolutely.
to solve those problems. And then he started saying we might have to take money from here or there or there. No, like honestly, I mean, I don't want to sound harsh, but that person should be nowhere near any government office because he's just going to make decisions based on emotion.
Yeah.
I mean, his whole statement was emotional. It was all about, oh, it's not a dignified way of living. But I'm like, is it fair to tell someone that they cannot work because their value of labor is not at the minimum wage level? If you
Mm.
want to talk about dignity, I mean, I've seen people drinking themselves senseless because they can't get a job. Like, what's the point anyway? I'm not going to get hired, so I might as well just drink myself senseless. He doesn't know about that, but he thinks throwing money at the problem is going to make things better. It's not. For me, I'm not going to say it's virtue signaling, but that is how it came across.
Whatever the arguments, ordinary folk believe that a basic income grant will be a serious game changer in people's lives, offering some level of dignity and also serving to limit some of the antisocial conduct that can come with a lack of resources.
I think it would be a great idea. A lot of people have lost jobs, especially with this whole looting thing that has just taken place. So I think it would be a great relief for everyone. I mean, most people, they have other people who are dependent on them as well.
I think it's good for the public because most people are not working at these times. And if it was around, this grant was around before the looting, I don't think people would have looted. And especially there's people who never looted who are staying at home and they don't have nothing. So now it's really hard for them because there's no bread at the locations, there's nothing. I don't know what we're going to do without that money.
I think the basic layer of this grant.
Look at his beanie.
SACP.
I mean, if they didn't nitpick, they, like you can see clearly they picked certain individuals to reply. Like obviously they probably spoke to like 50 odd people. And I would imagine these 4 individuals were the only ones that said what is in line with what SABC is trying to push, All the others were just, binned. And this one really, when I saw this, really made me chuckle because I'm like, of course, you're gonna find a guy in a beanie with the South African Communist Party beanie. Of course, it fits so well.
It will help a lot in those disadvantaged communities and society to be laid out, to be exact, so that even if the poor of the poorest can get something that will be stable for them to get the basic needs.
It's a good thing, like if you are the only breadwinner at home, at least it can help some other family members also, just to get their lives on track, have some food. It will also reduce the violence in our country.
The Assembly of the Unemployed, a body that represents those who have no work, says it's noted President Ramaphosa's comments and says that the basic income grant is a necessary and urgent intervention.
All right, so I just thought I'd finish the clip quickly because it was almost finished anyway. And there you have it. Some people saying it is a good idea. I think, going back to your point, Dumo, emotional more than anything else. I think people are being misled into what this basic income grant actually is, because I am willing to bargain or even bet that the people they interviewed or showed in this interview weren't really working or don't have like how do I put this, a career job, if I can put it that way, like a job that pays them 20K a month or 30K a month or whatever, and they can see how much income tax is taken from that salary. And they don't see that, they don't feel that, so they think, oh yeah, well, if I'm working my little, burger flip at McDonald's or wherever, I get a little bit of money. If everybody contributes a little bit, like, that's fine, because my fellow man will also be able to live and not have to beg in the street. I think that's the emotional twist that is going on at the moment, and people are just very misled.
Right, misled quite a bit, but the emotional aspect that I think we mentioned, I think it also relies on a sense of, I wouldn't say, some would say selfishness, because the reality is that people don't want to help others. It has to be someone else's problem. So for them, it's almost like, yes, if the government is giving these guys 1,000 rand a month, not to say that it is the figure, of course, then therefore I don't have to help them, because hey, the government is giving them money, and that is the first part. And the second part is that I think that the people that were getting interviewed, in my opinion, were very, very naive. As you mentioned, some of them do not have that career job where they see how much tax is actually getting out of their salaries to pay for these government services. And also at the same time, many of them, I think, and it would be nice to know what the reports actually asked them, because sometimes these reporters have these leading questions where they say something along the lines of, there's been these, they'll say something like this: there have been these riots, what do you think of the basic income grants?
Yeah.
So intuitively they'll make that connection between the riots and that, and they'll be like, yeah, it's good, because if you give these guys money, they won't loot. Yeah.
Very
Okay.
true.
All right.
Very true.
Yeah. I mean, damn it. I mean, then you wouldn't have what's this thing? We wouldn't have there's William Kize in his issues. Digital Vibes would not exist. I mean, he gets paid more than me. Like, I'm not even. I don't even earn half of what he earns, but my word. I mean, and I'm not saying he looted, but my word. Yeah, people benefited because of him.
Yep, that's
so
very true.
So I think for me, that's also another worry, is that, how many people are actually so naive to believe that solving this is actually means we have to throw money at it. And that's worrying for me, because I feel that people haven't really woken up to what the ANC wants to achieve, and which is that they want a dependent class. They want to make your life so difficult that you got no choice but the grant. That's the reality.
So yeah, well, guys, I hope we've shed some light on this whole basic income grant. I'll probably have Dumo on the show later, or look out for him on the show. I'll probably have him on again to discuss more in depth about this basic income grant as it comes to light a little bit more. At the moment, it is still being discussed or thought about, as they say, or I don't know. They're playing around with the idea. But yeah, we know that when the ANC says they're playing around with an idea, not too long until it's actually in Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, you can subscribe to Dumo's channel, please. The link is in the description below. Dumo, how else can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Dumodenga, or you can just go into our Facebook Manpatria page, and I'll get back to you when you contact me.
Fantastic. Juma, thank you so much for joining me on this little experiment. I hope you had fun. I had fun. I hope the viewers had fun. As I always say on this channel, stay safe, be kind to one another, and I'll see you at the next one. Cheers.